the beginning, there was only chaos. Chaos was not a god, not a place, but a vast emptiness, a void without form or substance. Nothing existed within this emptiness. No light, no darkness, no sound, no silence. There was simply nothing at all. Time had not yet begun. Space had not yet formed. The very concepts of existence and non-existence had no meaning in this primordial state. Chaos stretched endlessly in all directions that did not yet exist. From this great void, the first beings slowly emerged. The first to come forth was Gaia. Gaia was the earth itself. She was the solid foundation upon which all things would rest. Gaia emerged from chaos with quiet dignity. She did not burst forth with violence or drama. Instead, she simply began to be. Gaia was vast and patient. Her forms stretched across what would become the world. She was the deep-rooted earth, the fertile soil. Chaos was not a god, not a place, but a vast emptiness, a void without form or substance. Nothing existed within this emptiness. No light, no darkness, no sound, no silence. There was simply nothing at all. Time had not yet begun. Space had not yet formed. The very concepts of existence and non-existence had no meaning in this primordial state. Chaos stretched endlessly in all directions that did not yet exist. From this great void, the first beings slowly emerged. The first to come forth was Gaia. Gaia was the earth itself. She was the solid foundation upon which all things would rest. Gaia emerged from chaos with quiet dignity. She did not burst forth with violence or drama. Instead, she simply began to be. Gaia was vast and patient. Her form stretched across what would become the world. She was the deep-rooted earth, the fertile soil, the stable ground. In her earliest moments, Gaia existed in perfect stillness. She was content to simply exist, to provide the foundation for what was to come. After Gaia came Tartarus. Tartarus was the deepest place, far beneath the earth. He was the abyss that lay at the very bottom of all existence. Tartarus was dark and remote. He existed in the deepest depths, removed from the surface world. Like Gaia, he emerged quietly from chaos. He took his place in the cosmic order without fanfare or celebration. Tartarus was patient and enduring. He accepted his role as the keeper of the depths. He would remain there, constant and unchanging, for all time. The darkness of Tartarus was not frightening. It was simply deep, profound, a necessary part. The third to emerge was Eros. Eros was love itself, but not the passionate love of mortals. This was the fundamental force that would draw things together, the power that would cause new beings to come into existence. Eros was the creative impulse, that would shape all future generations. Eros moved through the void with gentle purpose. His influence was subtle but profound. Where Eros touched, new possibilities were born. He was the force that would bring order to chaos, that would cause the first beings to create offspring, to build the world. These three, Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros, were the first true beings. They emerged from chaos without parents, without creators. They simply began. They existed because existence itself had begun. Gaia, in her vast wisdom, understood that she was meant to create. Under the influence of Eros, she brought forth her first child. This child was Uranus, the sky. Uranus emerged from Gaia as her equal in size and scope. Where Gaia was the earth below, Uranus became the heavens above. Uranus stretched across the entire world, covering Gaia like a vast dome. He was the star-filled night sky, the blue expanse of day. He was infinite and eternal, matching Gaia's earthly expanse with his celestial realm. Uranus was born to be Gaia's partner in creation. The union of Gaia and Uranus was profound and cosmic. Earth and sky came together in perfect harmony. From their union, all future generations would spring. They were the mother and father of gods, the foundation of divine lineage. But Gaia also created alone. From her own essence, she brought forth the mountains. These were the great peaks that rose from her surface, reaching toward Uranus above. The mountains were her sons, born without a father. They were tall and proud, standing as pillars between earth and sky. The mountains took their places across Gaia's surface. They stood in silent majesty, their peaks touching the lower reaches of Uranus. They were ancient and enduring, patient watchers over the world. Each mountain had its own character, its own quiet dignity. Gaia also gave birth to Pontus, the sea. Pontus was the vast waters that would surround the land. He was born from Gaia alone, without Uranus as father. Pontus was deep and mysterious, his waters stretching to the horizon and beyond. Pontus was calm and rhythmic. His waves moved in steady patterns, following ancient currents. He was the source of all waters, the beginning of all rivers and streams. Pontus accepted his role as the encircling sea, the boundary between the known world and the unknown. With her primary children established, Gaia turned her attention to a greater work. Together with Uranus, she began to create the Titans. The Titans would be the second generation of divine beings. The bridge between the primordial powers and the gods who would come later. The first Titan to be born was Oceanus. Oceanus was the great river that encircled the entire world. He was vast beyond measure, his waters flowing in an endless loop around the edge of the earth. Oceanus was patient and eternal, his currents never ceasing, never changing course. Oceanus was thoughtful and wise. He understood his role as the boundary of the world, the limit beyond which lay only mystery. His waters were fresh and clean, the source of all the world's rivers. He flowed in perfect silence, his presence both powerful and peaceful. The second Titan was Coeus. Coeus was the embodiment of inquiry and questioning. He was the divine intellect, the force that sought to understand the nature of all things. Coeus was quiet and contemplative, spending his time in deep thought about the mysteries of existence. Coeus rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried great weight. He was the observer, the one who watched and learned. He understood that knowledge came slowly, through patient observation and careful thought. Coeus was content to spend eternity in quiet contemplation. The third Titan was Creus. Creus was associated with the constellations and the measurement of time. He was the divine force that brought order to the passage of years and seasons. Creus watched the movement of stars across the sky, marking the progression of cosmic time. Creus was methodical and precise. He understood that time moved in great cycles, that all things had their proper seasons. He was the keeper of celestial order, ensuring that the stars followed their appointed paths across the heavens. The fourth Titan was Hyperion. Hyperion was the Titan of light and observation. He was the one who watched over the movements of the sun, moon, and dawn. Hyperion was bright and clear-sighted, able to see across vast distances with perfect clarity. Hyperion was calm and steady in his duties. He understood that light was necessary for life, that observation was necessary for wisdom. He watched over the world with patient attention, noting all that occurred beneath the sky. The fifth Titan was Iapetus. Iapetus was associated with mortality and the human race that would eventually come to be. He was the ancestor of those who would bring both great achievements and great suffering to the world. But in these early days, Iapetus was simply one of the Titans, patient and enduring like his brothers. Iapetus was thoughtful and somewhat melancholy. He seemed to understand, even in these early times, that the world would know both joy and sorrow. He accepted this knowledge with quiet dignity, understanding that all things had their proper place in the cosmic order. The sixth and youngest of the male Titans was Cronus. Cronus was destined to play a crucial role in the history of the gods, but in his early years, he was simply the youngest son of Gaia and Uranus. Cronus was ambitious and intelligent, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Cronus observed his parents and brothers with calculating eyes. He was patient, waiting for his time to come. Unlike his brothers, who seemed content with their roles in the cosmic order, Cronus harbored secret thoughts about power and rulership. The female Titans were equally significant. The first was Tethys, who became the wife of Oceanus. Tethys was the nurturing aspect of the sea, the mother of all the river gods and ocean nymphs. She was gentle and caring, devoted to fostering new life in the waters. Tethys moved through the waters with graceful purpose. She was the source of all fresh water that flowed across the land. Her children would become the 3,000 rivers and 3,000 ocean nymphs, filling the world with flowing water and gentle spirits. The second female titan was Thea. Thea was the titaness of sight and the shining light of the clear blue sky. She was the mother of the sun, moon, and dawn. Thea was beautiful and radiant, her presence bringing clarity and illumination to the world. Thea was serene and luminous. She understood that sight was one of the greatest gifts that could be given to living beings. She would ensure that the world was filled with light, that darkness would never completely overcome the earth. The third female titan was Rhea. Rhea was destined to become the mother of the Olympian gods. But in these early days, she was simply one of the titanesses. She was associated with fertility and motherhood, with the nurturing aspect of the earth. Rhea was patient and protective. She had a deep understanding of the cycles of birth and growth. She knew that all things came into being through careful nurturing and protection. Rhea would prove to be one of the most important figures in the history of the gods. The fourth female titan was Themis. Themis was the embodiment of divine order, law, and custom. She was the force that maintained proper relationships between gods and mortals, that ensured justice prevailed in all dealings. Themis was wise and impartial. She understood that order was necessary for civilization to flourish. She would become known for her ability to give counsel and prophecy, to see the proper course of action in any situation. The fifth female titan was Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne was the personification of memory. She was the keeper of all knowledge, the preserver of stories and histories. Without Mnemosyne, all achievements and wisdom would be lost to the passage of time. Mnemosyne was patient and thorough. She understood that memory was sacred, that the past must be preserved for future generations. She would eventually become the mother of the 9 muses, the goddesses who inspired art and learning. The sixth and final titaness was Phoebe. Phoebe was associated with prophecy and the oracle. She was the bright intellect that could see into the future, that could understand the will of fate. Phoebe was mysterious and wise, her knowledge deep and profound. Phoebe spoke little, but her words were always significant. She understood that the future was not fixed, but that certain patterns could be discerned by those with the wisdom to see. She would pass her prophetic gifts to future generations. These 12 titans, 6 male and 6 female, were the children of Gaia and Uranus. They were the second generation of divine beings, more complex and specialized than their primordial parents. Each titan had their own domain, their own area of influence and responsibility. The titans lived in harmony during their early years. They understood their roles in the cosmic order and accepted them with dignity. The world was still young, still finding its shape and structure. The Titans were the architects of this early world, each contributing their unique gifts to the whole. Oceanus flowed around the world's edge, his waters marking the boundary between the known and unknown. His gentle currents carried life-giving moisture to all corners of the earth. He was content in his role as the world's boundary, understanding that limits were necessary for order. Coeus continued his quiet contemplation, seeking to understand the deeper mysteries of existence. His thoughts moved slowly but profoundly, like deep currents beneath still water. He was building the foundation of all future wisdom and knowledge. Creus maintained his watch over the stars and seasons. He ensured that time moved in its proper cycles, that each season came in its appointed time. The stars followed their ancient paths across the sky under his careful guidance. Hyperion observed all that occurred in the world below. His clear sight missed nothing. His understanding of celestial movements was perfect. He was the eye of heaven, watching over the world with patient attention. Iapetus brooded on the nature of mortality and suffering. Even in these early, peaceful times, he seemed to understand that joy and sorrow were inseparably linked. He accepted this knowledge with melancholy wisdom. Cronus watched and waited. Unlike his brothers, he was not content with the current order. He observed his father, Uranus, with calculating eyes, noting the way absolute power was wielded. Secret thoughts grew in his mind like seeds in dark soil. Among the female Titans, Tethys nurtured the waters with maternal care. She was already beginning to give birth to the river gods and ocean nymphs, filling the world with gentle water spirits. Her children would bring life and beauty to every corner of the earth. Thea shone with gentle radiance, her light bringing clarity to all things. She was preparing for the time when she would give birth to the sun, moon, and dawn, the great lights that would govern the world's cycles of day and night. Rhea felt the stirring of maternal instincts. She understood that she was destined for great motherhood, though she did not yet know the specific shape her destiny would take. She was patient, waiting for the proper time. Themis established the foundations of law and order. Even in these early times, she was creating the principles that would govern divine and mortal behavior. Her wisdom would prove essential for maintaining justice in the world. Mnemosyne began her great work of preservation. She was already storing away the memories of these early times, ensuring that the history of the world would not be lost. Her perfect memory would become the source of all stories and songs. Phoebe gazed into the mists of the future, her prophetic sight revealing glimpses of what was to come. She saw great changes ahead, but she accepted this knowledge with calm resignation. The future would unfold as it must. For a long time, this was the state of the world. Gaia below, Uranus above. and the 12 titans fulfilling their various roles. The mountains stood in silent majesty, connecting earth and sky. Pontus encircled the land with his endless waters. The world was stable and ordered. But gradually, tensions began to develop between Gaia and Uranus. These tensions were not born of hatred or malice, but from fundamental differences in their natures and desires. The three Cyclopes were Brontes, Sterapes, and Arges. Each had a single eye in the center of his forehead, and each possessed tremendous skill in craftsmanship. They were the masters of thunder, lightning, and the forge. Their strength was enormous, their abilities unmatched. Brontes was the Cyclops of thunder. His voice could shake the foundations of the earth when he spoke. But he was gentle by nature, preferring to work quietly at his forge. He created wonders of metalwork, tools and weapons of incredible power and beauty. Sterapes was the Cyclops of lightning. His single eye could flash with blinding light, and his touch could summon electrical storms. But like his brother, he was peaceful in temperament, devoted to his craft. He worked alongside Brontes, creating marvels of divine craftsmanship. Argus was the Cyclops of brightness. His eye shone like a star, illuminating the darkest places. He was the most contemplative of the three, often pausing in his work to gaze into the distance with his single, all-seeing eye. The three Hecatoncheires were Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges. Each had 50 heads and 100 arms. They were beings of incredible strength and endurance, capable of feats that would be impossible for any other beings. Their appearance was strange and somewhat frightening, but their hearts were loyal and true. Cottus was known for his strategic thinking. Despite his monstrous appearance, he possessed a keen intelligence and could devise complex plans of action. His 100 arms moved in perfect coordination, allowing him to accomplish tasks that would take others much longer. Briareus was the strongest of the three. His 100 arms could hurl boulders like pebbles. His 50 heads could roar with the voice of a hurricane. But he was gentle with those smaller than himself, understanding that his great strength came with great responsibility. Gyges was the most patient of the Hecatoncheires. He could work for centuries without rest, his many arms never tiring, his many heads never losing focus. He was devoted to any task given to him, no matter how long or difficult it might be. These children, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, were powerful and useful beings. They were loyal to their parents and willing to contribute to the cosmic order. But Uranus found their appearance disturbing. He did not like their strange forms, their enormous strength, their potential for disruption. In his fear and revulsion, Uranus made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. He took his youngest children, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, and cast them down into Tartarus. He buried them in the deepest depths of the earth, far from the light of the sky. This action caused Gaia great pain and anger. These were her children, and she loved them despite their unusual appearance. She suffered when they were torn from her and cast into the abyss. The separation was like a wound in her very being. Gaia pleaded with Uranus to release their children, but he refused. He insisted that they were too dangerous, too disruptive to remain free. They would stay in Tartarus, imprisoned in the depths, unable to affect the world above. As time passed, Gaia's pain turned to anger, and her anger turned to determination. She realized that Uranus would never voluntarily release their children. If they were to be freed, it would require force. It would require revolution. Gaia began to formulate a plan. She could not act directly against Uranus, for he was her equal in power. But she could work through their other children, the Titans. One of them might be willing to help her overthrow Uranus and establish a new order. She considered each of her Titan sons in turn. Oceanus was too distant, too focused on his role as the world's boundary. Coes was too contemplative, too absorbed in his thoughts to take direct action. Krios was too methodical, too committed to the existing order. Hyperion was too loyal to his role as observer. Iapetus was too melancholy, too accepting of suffering. But Cronus was different. She had noticed the calculating look in his eyes, the way he watched his father with hidden resentment. Cronus was ambitious and intelligent. He might be willing to help her if the right opportunity presented itself. Gaia approached Cronus in secret. She spoke to him of the injustice that had been done to his brothers, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires. She told him of her pain at their imprisonment, of her desire to see them freed. She suggested that perhaps it was time for a new ruler to take control of the cosmos. Cronus listened carefully to his mother's words. He had indeed been harboring thoughts of rebellion, but he had not known how to proceed. Now Gaia was offering him both justification and opportunity. The overthrow of Uranus would serve justice and advance his own ambitions. But Cronus was cautious. He knew that Uranus was immensely powerful, that a direct confrontation would be dangerous. He asked Gaia what she proposed to do. How could they hope to overcome the ruler of the sky? Gaia had already considered this problem. She could not defeat Uranus through strength alone, but she could create a weapon that would give Cronus the advantage he needed. She would forge an adamantine sickle, a blade so sharp and strong that it could cut through anything, even the divine flesh of Uranus. Working in secret, deep within her earthly realm, Gaia created the sickle. She poured all her skill and determination into its forging. The blade was curved and deadly, its edge sharper than any weapon that had ever existed. The handle was perfectly balanced, designed to fit Cronus's hand. When the sickle was complete, Gaia presented it to Cronus. She explained her plan. Cronus would hide in wait for Uranus. When his father came to embrace Gaia, as was his custom each night, Cronus would strike. The sickle would give him the power to wound Uranus, to remove him from power. Cronus took the sickle and felt its weight in his hand. The weapon seemed to pulse with power, eager to fulfill its purpose. He understood that this moment would change everything. Once he struck, there would be no going back. The age of Uranus would end, and a new age would begin. The other Titans sensed that something momentous was approaching, but they did not know what form it would take. They continued their duties as always, maintaining the order of the world. But there was a tension in the air, a sense that great changes were coming. Oceanus flowed around the world's edge, his currents steady and eternal. But even he could feel the disturbance in the cosmic order. The waters reflected his unease, their surface rippling with unusual patterns. Coeus paused in his contemplations, sensing that his deep thoughts were about to be interrupted by dramatic events. His intellectual nature recoiled from the approaching violence, but he understood that change was sometimes necessary. Crius noted irregularities in the movement of the stars, signs that the celestial order was about to be disrupted. His methodical nature was troubled by these omens, but he continued his duties faithfully. Hyperion's clear sight detected subtle changes in the light patterns of the world. His observational skills told him that a great upheaval was approaching, but he could not determine its exact nature. Iapetus felt a deepening of his melancholy, as if the sorrows he had long sensed were about to manifest in the world. He accepted this knowledge with his usual resignation, understanding that suffering was an inevitable part of existence. Among the female Titans, similar presentiments stirred. Tethys felt a disturbance in her nurturing waters. Thea noticed fluctuations in her radiant light. Rhea sensed that her time of great motherhood was approaching. Themis perceived that the cosmic order was about to be challenged. Mnemosyne prepared to record the great events that were coming. Phoebe's prophetic sight showed her glimpses of the upheaval ahead, but none of them knew the specific details of what Gaia and Cronus were planning. The conspiracy remained secret, known only to mother and son. They waited for the right moment, when conditions would be perfect for their plan. That moment came when Uranus descended from the heavens to embrace Gaia, as was his nightly custom. He came with love and desire, expecting the same peaceful union they had shared for countless ages. He had no suspicion of the trap that awaited him. Cronus hid in the shadows, the adamantine sickle gripped tightly in his hand. His heart pounded with anticipation and fear. He knew that success would make him the ruler of the cosmos, but failure would likely mean his destruction. Uranus embraced Gaia with the same passion he had always shown. He was completely absorbed in their union, his guard down, his attention focused entirely on his wife. This was the moment Gaia and Cronus had been waiting for. Cronus emerged from his hiding place, the sickle raised high. The blade gleamed in the starlight, its edge hungry for divine blood. With one swift motion, he brought the weapon down, striking at the very source of Uranus's power. The sickle cut cleanly through divine flesh. Uranus cried out in shock and pain as he was castrated by his own son. The wound was terrible and permanent, forever altering the cosmic order. Blood flowed from the injury, falling to the earth and sea below. From this divine blood, new beings would eventually be born. Where the blood fell on Gaia, it would give rise to the Erinyes, the Furies of vengeance. Where it fell in the sea, it would create Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. But these births were still in the future. For now, there was only the shock of the attack and its immediate consequences. Uranus, wounded and defeated, withdrew to the highest reaches of the sky. He would remain there forever after, distant and removed from the world below. His active role in cosmic affairs had ended. He became the fixed and eternal sky, no longer a participant, but merely the stage upon which other dramas would unfold. Before he withdrew completely, Uranus spoke a prophecy to Cronus. His voice carried the pain of betrayal and the certainty of prophetic sight. He declared that Cronus too would one day be overthrown by one of his own children, just as he had overthrown his father.
This prophecy would haunt Cronus throughout his reign. The words settled into his mind like a curse, creating a fear that would drive him to desperate measures in years to come. But for now, he was triumphant. He had won the rulership of the cosmos through cunning and violence. With Uranus defeated and withdrawn, Cronus claimed the throne of the universe. He was now the king of the gods, the ruler of the cosmic order. The other titans accepted his authority, recognizing that the old order had ended and a new one had begun. Cronus's first act as ruler was to fulfill his promise to Gaia. He descended into Tartarus and freed the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires. These strange and powerful beings emerged from their long imprisonment, grateful to their liberator, but wary of their freedom.
Cyclopes, Brontes, Steripes, and Arges returned to their work as craftsmen and forgers. They were skilled beyond measure, capable of creating wonders that no other beings could match. They would prove valuable allies to whoever treated them with respect. The Hecatonchires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, resumed their roles as guardians and workers. Their 100 arms and 50 heads made them formidable in any task, whether it be construction, defense, or warfare. They too would remember who had freed them from their prison. With the cosmic order re-established under his rule, Cronus set about organizing the world according to his vision. He was more systematic than Uranus had been, more willing to delegate authority to others. He assigned specific roles and territories to each of the Titans, creating a structured hierarchy. Oceanus continued to flow around the world's edge, but now he did so as a conscious ally of Cronus, rather than merely as a force of nature. His loyalty was rewarded with recognition and respect for his vital role in maintaining the world's boundaries. Coeus was given authority over the axis of the world, the cosmic pillar around which all celestial movements revolved. His contemplative nature made him ideal for this role, which required patient observation and deep understanding of cosmic mechanics. Creus was placed in charge of the southern pillar of the world, one of the four great supports that held up the sky. His methodical nature and understanding of stellar movements made him perfect for this crucial position. Hyperion was given dominion over the eastern pillar, the direction from which light emerged each day. His clear sight and understanding of celestial observation made him the ideal guardian of this vital cosmic support. Iapetus was assigned to the western pillar, the direction toward which light travelled each evening. His melancholy nature seemed appropriate for this role, as the west was associated with endings and transitions. Among the female titans, similar assignments were made. Tethys became the official mother of all water nymphs and river gods. Her nurturing nature perfectly suited to this role. Thea was recognized as the mother of celestial lights, preparing for her future children who would illuminate the world. Rhea was honored as the Great Mother, though her most important role was still in the future. Themis became the keeper of divine law and order, her wisdom essential for maintaining justice. Mnemosyne was made the official keeper of memory and history, ensuring that all important events would be preserved for future generations. Phoebe was recognized as the source of prophecy and divine inspiration, her oracular gifts respected and feared by all. Each Titaness had her proper role in the new cosmic order established by Cronus. The world under Cronus's rule was more organized and peaceful than it had been under Uranus. There was less tension, less fear of arbitrary punishment or imprisonment. The Titans worked together harmoniously, each contributing their unique gifts to the maintenance of cosmic order. This period came to be known as the Golden Age. It was a time of peace and prosperity when the world was young and full of potential. The climate was mild and pleasant everywhere. There were no seasons of harsh winter or scorching summer. Spring was eternal, and the earth provided abundantly for all who lived upon it. During this golden age, the first mortals came into being. They were created by the gods as companions and worshippers, beings who would honor the divine powers and live in harmony with the natural world. These first humans were noble and pure, free from the corruption and violence that would later plague their descendants. The Golden Age mortals lived for incredibly long lifespans, some for thousands of years. They remained young and vigorous throughout their lives, never knowing the weakness and infirmity of old age. When they finally died, it was peacefully, like falling into a gentle sleep. These first humans needed no agriculture, for the earth provided all their needs without labor. Fruit trees bore their bounty year-round. Grain grew wild in abundant fields. Clean water flowed freely from springs and streams. The mortals lived simple lives, taking only what they needed and wasting nothing. There was no war during the Golden Age, no conflict between nations or peoples. All mortals lived in peace, sharing the earth's abundance without greed or jealousy. They honored the gods with simple rituals and offerings, grateful for the peaceful world they inhabited. The mortals of the Golden Age communicated directly with the gods. The Titans would sometimes visit the earth, walking among the humans and sharing their wisdom. There was no barrier between the divine and mortal realms, no fear or misunderstanding. Cronus ruled over this peaceful world with wisdom and restraint. He had learned from his father's mistakes, understanding that excessive control led only to rebellion and conflict. He allowed his subjects considerable freedom, intervening only when necessary to maintain order. But despite the peace and prosperity of his reign, Cronus could not forget his father's prophecy. The words haunted him constantly, creating a growing fear that one of his own children would eventually overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Uranus. This fear was intensified when Cronus married his sister Rhea. She was destined to be the mother of powerful children, and their union would produce the next generation of gods. Every child born to them would be a potential threat to Cronus's power. Rhea was a devoted wife and eager to become a mother. She embodied all the nurturing and protective instincts of motherhood, and she longed to raise children who would be worthy heirs to the cosmic throne. She had no knowledge of Cronus's growing paranoia about his future offspring. When Rhea became pregnant with their first child, Cronus's fear reached a crisis point. He could not bear the thought of being overthrown, could not accept that his reign might one day end. The prophecy of Uranus echoed constantly in his mind, driving him to desperate measures. Cronus made a terrible decision. When the child was born, he would swallow it immediately, preventing it from ever growing to maturity and threatening his power. This solution would eliminate the danger while keeping the child technically alive, trapped within his divine body. When the time came and Rhea gave birth to their first child, a daughter, Cronus put his plan into action. Before Rhea could even properly see her newborn baby, he seized the infant and swallowed her whole. The child disappeared into his divine stomach, alive but imprisoned. This child was Hestia, who would one day become the goddess of the hearth and home. But for now, she existed in darkness within her father's body, waiting for the day when she might be freed. Rhea was horrified by her husband's action. She pleaded with him to explain why he had done such a terrible thing to their child. Cronus told her about Uranus's prophecy, about his fear of being overthrown. He explained that this was the only way to prevent the fulfillment of the curse. Despite her horror and grief, Rhea submitted to her husband's will. She understood the power of prophetic curses and the fear they could instill. But in her heart, she vowed that somehow she would find a way to save her future children from this terrible fate. When Rhea became pregnant again, the same pattern repeated. She gave birth to another daughter, and Cronus immediately swallowed the infant. This child was Demeter, destined to become the goddess of agriculture and the harvest. She too disappeared into her father's stomach, joining her sister in dark imprisonment. The third child was also swallowed immediately upon birth. This was Hera, future queen of the gods and goddess of marriage. She joined her sisters in their father's belly, all three divine infants trapped in darkness, unable to grow or develop as they should. The fourth child to be swallowed was Hades, the first son of Cronus and Rhea. He was destined to become the ruler of the underworld, the kingdom of the dead. But like his sisters before him, he was consumed by his fearful father before he could even draw his first breath of free air. The fifth child was Poseidon, future god of the sea and earthquakes. He too suffered the same fate, disappearing into Cronus's stomach to join his siblings in their strange imprisonment. 5 children had been born, and 5 had been swallowed. By this time, Rhea's grief and anger had grown beyond her ability to contain. She had watched 5 of her children disappear into their father's maw, had seen each precious infant consumed by paranoid fear. She could not bear the thought of losing another child to Cronus's madness. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, she began to formulate a plan. She would not allow this child to suffer the same fate as the others. Somehow, she would save this baby, and perhaps find a way to rescue the children who had already been swallowed. Rhea turned to her mother Gaia for help. Gaia understood her daughter's pain and was appalled by Cronus's treatment of his own children. She agreed to help Rhea save the 6th child, and perhaps find a way to overthrow Cronus, just as she had once helped overthrow Uranus. Together, Rhea and Gaia devised a careful plan. When the time came for the birth, Rhea would travel to the island of Crete, far from Cronus's watchful eyes. There, in a hidden cave on Mount Ida, she would give birth in secret. The child would be raised away from his father, protected by loyal guardians. When Rhea's labor began, she told Cronus that she needed solitude for the birth. This was not unusual, as divine births were often private affairs. Cronus allowed her to depart, expecting that she would return soon with another child for him to swallow. Instead, Rhea traveled swiftly to Crete. The island was remote and mountainous, perfect for hiding a divine child. In the depths of the cave on Mount Ida, surrounded by loyal nymphs and protected by ancient magic, Rhea gave birth to her 6th child. This child was Zeus, destined to become the king of the gods and ruler of the sky. He was born strong and healthy, his cries echoing through the sacred cave. The nymphs who attended the birth immediately recognized his divine power and pledged themselves to his protection. But Rhea knew that her absence would soon be noticed. She had to return to Cronus with something that would satisfy his paranoid need to swallow his children. Gaia provided the solution: a large stone wrapped in swaddling clothes to resemble an infant. Rhea returned to Cronus, carrying the disguised stone. In the dim light, exhausted from what appeared to be a difficult birth, she presented the bundle to her husband. Cronus, eager to eliminate another potential threat, snatched the bundle, and swallowed it immediately without close examination. The stone settled into Cronus's stomach alongside his 5 children. He felt a sense of relief, believing that he had once again prevented the fulfillment of his father's prophecy. He had no idea that his most dangerous son was alive and growing strong in a cave on distant Crete. Meanwhile, Zeus grew rapidly in his hidden sanctuary. The nymphs fed him on ambrosia and nectar, the food of the gods. He was nursed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk gave him strength and divine power. The Curetes, warrior priests of Crete, guarded the cave and performed wild dances to mask the sound of his crying. Zeus was an extraordinary child from the beginning. He learned quickly, mastering divine powers at an incredible rate. His strength grew daily, and his intelligence surpassed that of any previous god. The nymphs and Curetes could see that he was destined for greatness. As Zeus matured, he learned the truth about his parentage and his siblings' fate. The nymphs told him how his father had swallowed his brothers and sisters, how his mother had sacrificed her own happiness to save him. Zeus felt a burning desire for justice and revenge. Years passed in the peaceful routine of the Golden Age. Cronus continued to rule the cosmos, unaware that his greatest enemy was growing stronger every day. The Titans maintained their various duties. The world remained at peace, and the first generation of mortals lived their long, happy lives. But change was coming. As Zeus reached maturity, he began to plan his return to the world of the gods. He would not remain hidden forever. The time was approaching when he would challenge his father and free his imprisoned siblings. Rhea, who had visited Zeus secretly throughout his youth, helped him prepare for this moment. She provided him with knowledge of his father's weaknesses, information about the cosmic order, and most importantly, access to powerful allies who could help in the coming conflict. The first ally Zeus recruited was Metis, a daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. Metis was the personification of wisdom and cunning, known for her ability to devise clever solutions to impossible problems. She agreed to help Zeus rescue his siblings and overthrow Cronus. Metis prepared a special potion, a mixture that would cause Cronus to vomit up the children he had swallowed. The potion was disguised as wine, appearing no different from the nectar that the gods usually drank. Zeus would need to find a way to get Cronus to consume it. The opportunity came during a great feast of the gods. Cronus, feeling secure in his power and pleased with the continued peace of his realm, was in a celebratory mood. Zeus, disguised as a young cupbearer, approached his father with the doctored wine. Cronus drank deeply of the wine, enjoying its apparently fine taste. He noticed nothing unusual about the liquid, had no suspicion that it contained a powerful emetic. The potion worked quickly, causing violent nausea in the Titan King. Unable to control his divine body's reaction to the potion, Cronus began to vomit. First came the stone that Rhea had given him in place of Zeus. the rock that had been disguised as an infant. The stone flew from his mouth and landed with a tremendous crash. Then came the 5 children he had actually swallowed. Poseidon emerged first, followed by Hades, then Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia. Each divine child had continued to grow even while imprisoned in their father's stomach, and they emerged as fully mature gods and goddesses. The 5 siblings were disoriented at first, having spent years in darkness within their father's body. But they quickly regained their composure and their divine powers. They looked around at the world they had never seen, then turned their attention to Zeus, the brother who had freed them. Zeus revealed his true identity to his siblings and explained how he had grown up in secret on Crete. He told them of their mother's sacrifice, of Gaia's help, and of his plan to overthrow their tyrannical father. The siblings readily agreed to join him in this rebellion. Cronus, recovering from the effects of the potion, realized what had happened. His worst fears had been realized. Not only had one of his children reached maturity, but all 6 of them were now free and clearly hostile to his rule. The prophecy of Uranus was beginning to fulfill itself. A great war was about to begin. This would be the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympians. It would reshape the cosmic order and determine who would rule the universe for ages to come. Zeus and his siblings prepared for battle. They were young and vigorous, filled with righteous anger at their treatment. But they were inexperienced in war and faced enemies who had ruled the cosmos for eons. They would need powerful allies if they hoped to succeed. Zeus remembered the beings that Cronus had freed from Tartarus years before, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. These powerful creatures had reason to be grateful to Cronus, but they also had reason to remember their long imprisonment under Uranus. Zeus decided to seek their aid. The 6 siblings descended into the depths of the earth to find the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires. They found them living in the shadowy regions between the upper world and Tartarus, working at their various crafts and duties. The meeting between the generations was tense but respectful. Zeus spoke eloquently to the ancient beings, explaining his cause and asking for their aid. He promised that if they helped him defeat Cronus, they would be honored and rewarded under the new order. They would never again face imprisonment or exile. The Cyclopes were the first to agree. Brontes, Steropes, and Arges had grown weary of their exile from the upper world. They longed to use their skills in service of a worthy cause. They agreed to forge weapons for Zeus and his siblings, arms that would give them the power to challenge the Titans. Working with incredible speed and skill, the Cyclopes created 3 mighty weapons. For Zeus, they forged the Thunderbolt, a weapon of pure lightning that could shatter mountains and shake the heavens. The Thunderbolt was perfectly balanced, responding to Zeus's will with devastating power. For Poseidon, they created the trident, a three-pronged spear that could command the seas and cause earthquakes. The trident gave its wielder complete dominion over all waters and the power to shake the very foundations of the earth. For Hades, they forged the helmet of invisibility, a cap that rendered its wearer completely undetectable. The helmet would allow Hades to move unseen through any battlefield, to strike without warning, to appear and disappear at will. These weapons were masterpieces of divine craftsmanship, imbued with cosmic power that had never been equaled. They would prove decisive in the coming war, giving the younger gods the strength they needed to challenge their elders. The Hecaton Kyries also agreed to join Zeus's cause. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges had not forgotten their long imprisonment in Tartarus. They too desired freedom and recognition for their loyal service. Their 100 arms and tremendous strength would be invaluable in the war to come. With these powerful allies secured, Zeus and his siblings prepared for the great conflict. They established their base of operations on Mount Olympus, the highest peak in the mortal world. From there, they could see across the entire cosmos and plan their strategy. Mount Olympus was a fitting choice for their stronghold. It was tall enough to reach toward the heavens, symbolic of their ambitions to rule the sky. It was all the 6 siblings divided the responsibilities of leadership among themselves. Zeus, as the one who had initiated the rebellion, was acknowledged as their leader. His thunderbolt and his natural charisma made him the obvious choice to command their forces. Poseidon took charge of naval operations and anything involving water or earthquakes. His trident gave him power over vast forces of nature that could be turned against their enemies. He was a natural strategist, understanding how to use terrain and natural phenomena in warfare. Hades became their master of stealth and intelligence gathering. His helmet of invisibility allowed him to spy on enemy movements and strike at crucial targets without detection. He was patient and methodical, perfect for the careful work of reconnaissance. Hera used her natural authority and diplomatic skills to recruit additional allies. She reached out to other divine beings who might have grievances against the current order, building a coalition of support for their cause. Demeter focused on ensuring that their forces were well supplied. Her connection to agriculture and the Earth's bounty allowed her to provide food and resources for their growing army. She understood that wars were won as much by logistics as by fighting. Hestia, the eldest of the siblings, served as their moral center and keeper of the sacred fire. She maintained the divine flame that symbolized their righteous cause, ensuring that their rebellion remained focused on justice rather than mere revenge. As word of the rebellion spread, other divine beings began to choose sides. Some Titans remained loyal to Cronus, believing that the established order should be preserved. Others began to question whether change might be necessary. Oceanus, the great river that encircled the world, remained neutral. His position at the world's edge made him somewhat removed from the central conflict, and his peaceful nature made him reluctant to take sides in a war between family members. Prometheus and Epimetheus, sons of the Titan Iapetus, chose to support Zeus. Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, could see that the younger gods represented the future. His prophetic abilities told him that Zeus would ultimately triumph. Atlas, another son of Iapetus, remained loyal to Cronus. His enormous strength made him a valuable defender of the old order. He would lead the Titan forces in battle, his powerful shoulders capable of bearing any burden. Many of the lesser divine beings, nymphs, river gods, minor deities, waited to see how the conflict would develop before committing to either side. They understood that the loser in this war would face severe consequences, and they wanted to be certain of backing the winner. The war began slowly, with minor skirmishes and tests of strength. Both sides were feeling out their opponents, learning their capabilities and weaknesses. Poseidon's mastery of his trident was equally impressive. He could summon tidal waves that swept across continents, cause earthquakes that split mountains, and create whirlpools that could swallow entire islands. His dominion over water gave him tactical advantages that his enemies found difficult to counter. Hades proved to be a master of psychological warfare. His helmet of invisibility allowed him to appear suddenly among enemy forces, striking fear into their hearts before vanishing again. He could infiltrate enemy councils, learning their plans and sowing confusion among their ranks. The three sisters were equally effective in their own ways. Hera's diplomatic skills helped maintain unity among the diverse coalition of forces fighting for Zeus. Her natural authority commanded respect from allies and enemies alike. Demeter's control over agriculture became a weapon of war. She could cause famines in enemy territory while ensuring abundant harvests for their allies. Her power over the Earth's fertility made her indispensable to the war effort. Hestia's sacred fire became a rallying point for their forces. The flame never flickered or died, symbolizing the eternal nature of their cause. Warriors drew strength from its light, knowing that they fought for something greater than themselves. The Cyclopes proved invaluable, not just for their initial weapon making, but for their ongoing support throughout the conflict. They continued to forge arms and armor for Zeus's forces, each piece a masterwork of divine craftsmanship. Their weapons never broke or dulled. Their armor never failed to protect. The Hecatoncheires were devastating in direct combat. Each of the three could fight with the strength of 100 warriors, their multiple arms allowing them to wield dozens of weapons simultaneously. When they hurled stones, It was like facing an avalanche. When they charged into battle, enemy lines broke before them. Cronus and his loyal titans were not helpless, however. They had ruled the cosmos for ages and possessed vast power and experience. Cronus himself was a formidable opponent, his mastery of time giving him advantages that were difficult to counter. Atlas proved to be the backbone of the Titan defense. His incredible strength allowed him to hold defensive positions that would have been impossible for others to maintain. He could hurl boulders the size of mountains, and his endurance seemed unlimited. The war raged for 10 long years. Neither side could achieve a decisive victory, though the balance slowly began to shift in favor of Zeus and his allies. The younger gods were learning and adapting, while the Titans found themselves fighting a kind of warfare they had never experienced. The turning point came when Zeus decided to make a bold, strategic move. He would free the most powerful prisoners in Tartarus, beings so dangerous that even Cronus had not dared to release them. These were the children of Gaia and Tartarus themselves, monsters of unimaginable power. Zeus descended into the deepest depths of the underworld, past the realm of Hades, down to the very floor of Tartarus. There he found beings that had been imprisoned since the dawn of time, creatures of such power that their very existence threatened the stability of the cosmos. The most significant of these was Typhon, a monster with 100 dragon heads, each one breathing fire and speaking in the voices of all the animals of the earth. His body was covered in wings, and his eyes flashed with divine fire. He was chaos incarnate, a force of pure destruction. But Zeus did not free Typhon. Even in his desperation for allies, he recognized that some powers were too dangerous to unleash. Instead, he made a bargain with the monster, promising future consideration in exchange for information about other potential allies. Typhon told Zeus of other beings imprisoned in Tartarus, creatures that could be controlled and directed against the Titans. There were giants born from Gaia's blood, monsters with specific grudges against the current order, and primordial forces that longed for freedom. Zeus carefully selected a few of these beings, those whose power could be harnessed without threatening the cosmic order itself. He freed them one by one, binding them with oaths of loyalty and service. Each addition to his forces brought him closer to victory. The war entered its final phase when Zeus launched a coordinated assault on the Titan strongholds. The attack came from multiple directions simultaneously. From the sky with thunderbolts, from the sea with tidal waves, from beneath the earth with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The Hecaton Kyries proved decisive in this final battle. Their 100 arms could hurl projectiles faster than the eye could follow, creating a barrage that no defense could withstand. They advanced like living siege engines, unstoppable and terrifying. Atlas seeing that the battle was lost, made a final desperate stand. He gathered the remaining loyal Titans around him and attempted to hold the center of their defensive line. For a moment, it seemed as though his incredible strength might turn the tide. But Zeus had anticipated this final resistance. He struck Atlas directly with his most powerful thunderbolt, a blast of lightning that illuminated the entire cosmos. The bolt struck Atlas squarely, driving him to his knees and breaking the Titan resistance. With their greatest champion defeated, the remaining Titans quickly surrendered. The war was over, and Zeus had emerged victorious. The age of the Titans had ended, and the age of the Olympians had begun. The aftermath of the war required careful handling. Zeus had to decide the fate of. The combat lasted for what seemed like eternities. Thunder crashed against roaring flames. Lightning met with poisonous breath. Divine will struggled against primordial chaos. The very foundations of Tartarus shook under the force of their conflict, and tremors reached all the way to the surface world above. But gradually, Zeus began to gain the upper hand. His experience in warfare, his mastery of strategy, and his divine weapons gave him advantages that raw power alone could not overcome. He struck Typhon with thunderbolt after thunderbolt, each one precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. The monster's 100 heads began to weaken under the assault. One by one, they stopped breathing fire and began to droop with exhaustion. Typhon's roars became whimpers. His struggles against his chains grew feebler, and his eyes began to dim. In the end, Zeus did not destroy Typhon completely. Instead, he bound the monster with chains even stronger than before. Chains forged from the very essence of order itself. Typhon was pressed down into the deepest pit of Tartarus, buried under a mountain that would hold him for all eternity. This mountain would later be known as Mount Etna in Sicily. The fire that occasionally erupted from its peak was said to be Typhon's breath, still trying to escape, even in defeat. But the monster himself was permanently contained, no longer a threat to the cosmic order. With Typhon defeated, Zeus had eliminated the last great threat to his rule. The primordial powers had been contained, the Titans were imprisoned, and the Olympians were secure in their authority. The cosmos was finally stable under the new order. Zeus returned to Mount Olympus victorious, but also thoughtful. The battle with Typhon had reminded him of how fragile the cosmic order truly was, how much effort was required to maintain civilization against the forces of chaos. He understood that eternal vigilance would be necessary. The other Olympians welcomed Zeus back with relief and celebration. They had felt the tremors of his battle with Typhon and feared what might happen if the monster broke free. His victory assured them that their reign would continue, that the world would remain stable and ordered. But Zeus was already turning his attention to other matters. The defeat of Typhon had cleared the way for him to address the question that had been troubling him: the creation of a fourth race of mortals. He was determined to succeed where the previous three races had failed. Zeus spent long periods in contemplation, studying the mistakes that had led to the destruction of the golden, silver, and bronze races. He consulted with his siblings, seeking their wisdom about what kind of mortals might prove worthy of continued existence. Athena, who had been born from Zeus's head, fully grown and armoured, offered insights about the balance between wisdom and courage. She suggested that mortals needed both intellectual gifts and physical bravery, but in proper proportion to each other. Apollo, god of light and music, emphasized the importance of harmony and balance. He argued that mortals should be capable of both creation and destruction, but should prefer creation when given the choice. Art and beauty should play important roles in their lives. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon, stressed the need for mortals to maintain proper relationships with the natural world. They should be neither completely dependent on nature nor completely separate from it, but should find a middle path. Hephaestus, the craftsman god, who had been born to Hera alone, contributed thoughts about the value of work and skill. He believed that mortals should find meaning through their efforts and achievements, that labour should be both necessity and source of pride. Aphrodite, who had been born from the sea foam that formed around Uranus's severed parts, spoke of the importance of love and relationships. She argued that mortals needed strong emotional bonds to give their lives meaning and to prevent them from falling into violence or despair. Ares, despite his love of warfare, had learned from observing the Bronze race that conflict should serve purpose rather than becoming an end in itself. He suggested that mortals needed ways to channel their aggressive instincts constructively. Hermes, the messenger god, known for his cleverness and speed, emphasized adaptability and communication. He believed that mortals should be able to change and grow. But Zeus also decided that these mortals would not be created by the gods alone. Instead, he would delegate the task to Prometheus and Epimetheus, the two Titan brothers who had supported him during the war against Cronus. This would be their reward for their loyalty. Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, was known for his wisdom and planning abilities. Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought, was more impulsive, but also more creative and spontaneous. Together, they represented the balance between careful planning and creative inspiration. Zeus summoned the two brothers to Mount Olympus and explained his decision. He wanted them to create mortals who would be worthy inhabitants of the earth, beings who could honor the gods while also developing their own civilization and culture. The task was both an honor and a responsibility. Prometheus and Epimetheus understood that they were being entrusted with shaping the future of mortal existence. The success or failure of this fourth race would reflect on their wisdom and skill. Prometheus approached the task with his characteristic, careful planning. He studied the remains of the previous mortal races, analyzing what had made them successful and what had led to their downfall. He wanted to understand the principles that should guide the creation of better mortals. From the golden race, Prometheus saw the value of contentment and harmony with the divine. But he also recognized that their perfection had made them static, unable to grow or change. The new mortals would need challenges to spur development. From the silver race, he learned about the importance of proper reverence toward the gods. But he also saw how their extended childhood had left them unprepared for adult responsibilities. The new mortals would need to mature more quickly and completely. From the bronze race, he appreciated their courage and achievements, but he also saw how their focus on warfare had ultimately destroyed them. The new mortals would need other outlets for their energies and ambitions. Epimetheus, meanwhile, was more focused on the immediate act of creation. He gathered clay from various parts of the earth, mixing soil that had been blessed by different gods and nymphs. Each handful of clay carried the essence of the place it came from. The clay from Gaia's most fertile regions would give the mortals a connection to agriculture and growth. Clay from mountainous areas would provide strength and endurance. Soil from riverbanks would offer adaptability and flow. Earth from sacred groves would maintain their connection to the divine. As Epimetheus worked, he found himself creating mortals with more individual variation than the previous races had possessed. Some were taller, others shorter. Some were stronger, others more agile. Some had natural talents for music, others for craftsmanship, still others for leadership. This diversity was both intentional and accidental. Epimetheus believed that variety would make the mortal race more resilient, less likely to succumb to a single flaw that could destroy them all. But he was also responding to creative impulses that he didn't fully understand. Prometheus watched his brother's work with approval, but also with growing concern. He could see that Epimetheus was creating mortals with great potential, but he also recognized that they would need special gifts to survive and thrive in the world. The earth was no longer the gentle, abundant paradise it had been during the Golden Age. The wars between gods had changed the climate and geography. There were now harsh winters and scorching summers, dangerous storms and natural disasters. Mortals would need tools and knowledge to survive. But when Prometheus approached Zeus to request special gifts for the mortals, he was told that all such gifts had already been distributed to the animals. Each species had received the traits it needed for survival: thick fur for warmth, sharp claws for hunting, swift legs for escape, keen senses for detection of danger. The mortals being created last, would have to make do with what remained. They would be physically weaker than most animals, lacking natural weapons or armor. They would be slower than horses, less keen-sighted than eagles, less acute of hearing than deer. This seemed to Prometheus like a grave injustice. The mortals were being asked to survive in a hostile world without the natural advantages that every other species possessed. They would be at the mercy of weather, predators, and disease, with no special gifts to help them. Epimetheus, true to his nature, had not foreseen this problem. He had been so focused on the creative act of shaping the mortals that he had not considered what they would need after they were brought to life. He felt responsible for their plight, but didn't know how to help them. Prometheus, however, refused to accept that the mortals should be left defenseless. If Zeus would not provide them with the gifts they needed, then Prometheus would find another way to help them. He began to formulate a plan that would change the relationship between gods and mortals forever. The plan involved stealing fire from the gods and giving it to mortals. Fire was more than just a source of warmth and light. It was the foundation of technology, the tool that would allow mortals to create everything else they needed for survival and civilization. With fire, mortals could work metals to make tools and weapons. They could cook food to make it more nutritious and digestible. They could clear land for agriculture and defend themselves against predators. Fire would make them the equals of any animal, despite their physical weaknesses. But fire was sacred to the gods, carefully guarded in the divine realm. Stealing it would be an act of rebellion against the cosmic order, a theft that Zeus would surely punish severely. Prometheus understood the risks, but he felt that the mortals' need justified the crime. The theft required careful planning and perfect timing. Prometheus waited until the gods were distracted by a great festival celebrating Zeus's victory over Typhon. While they were feasting and celebrating, he slipped away from Mount Olympus and made his way to the sacred forge where divine fire burned eternally. The fire was guarded, but Prometheus's status as a titan and his reputation for loyalty allowed him to approach without suspicion. He concealed a hollow fennel stalk in his robes, a plant that could carry fire while appearing to be empty and harmless. When the moment was right, Prometheus thrust the fennel stalk into the sacred fire, capturing a spark of divine flame within the hollow stem. The fire caught and held, burning slowly and steadily without consuming the stalk or revealing its presence. With the stolen fire hidden in his robes, Prometheus made his way back to Earth, where the newly created mortals were struggling to survive. They were huddled together for warmth, eating raw food, and hiding from predators in caves and hollow trees. Prometheus revealed the fire to them, teaching them how to kindle flames and maintain them. The first sight of fire filled the mortals with wonder and gratitude. They understood immediately that this gift would transform their lives, giving them power over their environment. The mortals learned quickly how to use fire for cooking, warmth, and protection. They discovered that cooked food was more nutritious and easier to digest, that fire could drive away dangerous animals, and that light could extend their useful hours beyond daylight. But Prometheus did not stop with the gift of fire. He also taught the mortals many other skills that would help them build civilization. He showed them how to work metals, how to build houses, how to plant crops, how to domesticate animals, and how to navigate by the stars. These lessons transformed the mortals from helpless refugees into the founders of a new kind of civilization. They began to build cities, develop agriculture, create art and music, and establish laws and customs. For the first time, mortals were not merely surviving, but truly living. The fourth race of mortals, later called the Heroic Age or the Age of Demigods, began to flourish under Prometheus's guidance. They were more resilient than their predecessors, more adaptable to changing circumstances, and more capable of learning from their mistakes. But Zeus soon discovered what Prometheus had done. The theft of fire could not be hidden for long, as its effects were visible in the rapidly advancing mortal civilization. Zeus was furious at this unauthorized intervention in mortal affairs. The king of the gods felt that Prometheus had overstepped his authority and upset the proper balance between divine and mortal realms. Mortals were supposed to be dependent on the gods for their survival, grateful recipients of divine favor. Instead, they were becoming increasingly self-reliant and confident. Zeus decided that both Prometheus and the mortals needed to be punished for this transgression. The punishment would serve as a warning against future acts of rebellion and would restore the proper relationship between gods and mortals. For Prometheus, Zeus devised a punishment that would last for eternity. The Titan would be chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where an eagle would come each day to eat his liver. Since Prometheus was immortal, his liver would regenerate each night, only to be devoured again the next day. This punishment was both physically agonizing and psychologically torturous. Prometheus would suffer constant pain while also having to endure the knowledge that his gift to mortals had brought suffering to both himself and them. The punishment would continue until Zeus chose to end it. For the mortals, Zeus devised a more subtle but equally significant punishment. He would send them a gift that would appear to be a blessing, but would actually bring new forms of suffering into the world. This gift would be the first woman. Up to this point, all mortals had been male, created by Prometheus and Epimetheus from clay. They reproduced through divine intervention rather than natural means, and their society was simple and harmonious. Introduction of women would complicate everything. Zeus commissioned Hephaestus to create the first woman with the same care and skill that had gone into creating the mortals themselves. She would be beautiful beyond description, irresistibly attractive to mortal men, but she would also carry within her the seeds of future troubles. Hephaestus worked with great skill and attention to detail. He shaped the woman from the finest clay, giving her perfect proportions and features. Her beauty was so striking that even the gods stopped to admire his craftsmanship when they saw her. But beauty was only the beginning. Each of the gods contributed something to this first woman, creating a being of tremendous complexity and contradictory qualities. These gifts would make her fascinating, but also dangerous to mortal civilization. Aphrodite gave her irresistible charm and the power to inspire passionate love. Athena taught her domestic skills like weaving and household management. Apollo granted her musical ability and a lovely voice. Artemis gave her grace and skill in dancing. But the gifts were not all positive. Hermes contributed cunning and the ability to deceive. Ares gave her a capacity for anger and conflict. Hera added jealousy and possessiveness. Each gift that made her attractive also contained potential for trouble. When the creation was complete, Zeus named her Pandora, meaning all gifts, because she had received something from every god. She was the most complex being ever created, embodying both the greatest virtues and the most dangerous flaws of divine nature. Zeus sent Pandora to Earth as a gift for Epimetheus, knowing that the impulsive Titan would be unable to resist her beauty, despite any warnings he might have received. The plan was to integrate her into mortal society through marriage to one of the mortals' creators. Prometheus, chained to his rock and suffering under the eagle's daily torment, tried to warn his brother about Zeus's gift. He sent messages urging Epimetheus to refuse any gift from Zeus, knowing that it must contain some hidden trap or punishment. But Epimetheus, true to his nature as the god of afterthought, was completely captivated by Pandora's beauty when he saw her. He ignored his brother's warnings and welcomed her eagerly, believing that Zeus had sent her as a reward rather than a punishment. The marriage of Epimetheus and Pandora was celebrated by both gods and mortals. It seemed to represent a new harmony between the divine and mortal realms, a sign that Zeus had forgiven the theft of fire and was ready to bless mortal civilization with divine partnership. But Pandora had brought with her a wedding gift from Zeus, a beautiful jar, later called a box in some versions of the story, that she was instructed never to open. The jar was sealed and appeared to be simply a decorative object, but it contained forces that would reshape the mortal world. For a time, Pandora resisted the temptation to open the jar. She was happy in her new life with Epimetheus, busy learning about mortal customs and helping to guide the developing civilization. The jar sat unopened in their home, seemingly harmless and forgotten. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when combined with the divine gifts that Pandora had received. The jar seemed to call to her, whispering promises of knowledge and understanding. she began to spend more and more time staring at it, wondering what secrets it might contain. The other mortals, meanwhile, were continuing to develop their civilization under the influence of Prometheus's gifts. They had learned to work iron as well as bronze, creating better tools and weapons. Their cities grew larger and more sophisticated. Their art became more refined, and their understanding of the world deepened. This was the heroic age, the time of great mortals who accomplished deeds that rivaled those of the gods themselves. These heroes were often the children of unions between gods and mortals, combining divine power with human determination and creativity. The heroes of this age included figures who would become legendary. Heracles, with his tremendous strength, Perseus, who slew monsters, Theseus, who founded cities, Jason, who led great expeditions. Each hero faced challenges that tested both their abilities and their character. But even as heroic civilization flourished, the seeds of future trouble were growing. The complexity that Prometheus and Epimetheus had built into mortal nature was beginning to manifest itself in new ways. Some mortals were becoming proud, ambitious, and forgetful of their debts to the gods. The tension between divine and mortal realms was also increasing. Some heroes began to believe that their achievements made them equal to the gods, that they deserved places on Mount Olympus alongside Zeus and his siblings. This hubris would have serious consequences. It was in this atmosphere of growing tension that Pandora finally succumbed to her curiosity about the jar. Unable to resist any longer, she carefully lifted the lid to peek inside, intending to look for just a moment before closing it again. But the moment the jar was opened, its contents began to escape. These were not physical objects, but abstract forces. Disease, old age, war, famine, jealousy, hatred, despair, and all the other evils that would plague mortal life from that day forward. The evils poured out of the jar like a dark cloud, spreading rapidly across the earth and settling into mortal communities. Almost immediately, the effects began to be felt. People who had never known illness fell sick. Conflicts broke out between former friends, and a general sense of unease settled over the world. Pandora tried desperately to close the jar, but it was too late. The evils had escaped and could not be recalled. She had unwittingly fulfilled Zeus's plan, introducing suffering into the mortal world as punishment for Prometheus's theft of fire. But one thing remained in the jar when Pandora finally managed to close it. This was hope, a force that would allow mortals to endure the evils that had been released. Hope was perhaps the most precious gift of all, the quality that would keep mortals striving for better lives despite their sufferings. The release of evils from Pandora's jar marked the end of the heroic age's golden period. Mortals now had to contend not only with external challenges like wild animals and natural disasters, but also with internal struggles against disease, aging, and negative emotions. The change was gradual but profound. Where once mortal communities had been harmonious and cooperative, now there were disputes and conflicts. Where once people had lived long, healthy lives, now they faced illness and premature death. The world had become a more dangerous and unpredictable place. But mortals proved remarkably adaptable to their new circumstances. They developed medicine to fight disease, created laws to resolve conflicts, and built stronger communities to provide mutual support. In some ways, the challenges made them more resourceful and creative than they had been before. The heroes of this later period had to be different from their predecessors. They could not rely solely on strength or divine favor, but had to develop wisdom, cunning, and emotional resilience. They became more fully human, with all the complexity that implied. Zeus watched these developments with mixed feelings. His punishment had succeeded in making mortals more dependent on divine favor and more aware of their limitations. But he had not anticipated how resourcefully they would respond to their new challenges, or how their struggles would make them more interesting rather than simply more miserable. The relationship between gods and mortals entered a new phase during this period. The gods became more actively involved in mortal affairs, sometimes helping their favorites and sometimes punishing those who offended them. The clear separation between divine and mortal realms began to blur. Some gods took mortal lovers and produced heroic children who combined divine and human qualities. These demigods served as bridges between the two realms, understanding both divine power and mortal limitations. They often became the greatest heroes of their age. Other gods served as patrons of mortal cities or activities. Athena protected Athens and guided its development as a center of wisdom and art. Apollo inspired musicians and poets. Artemis watched over hunters and protected wild places. Hephaestus taught mortals advanced crafts and metallurgy. But this increased interaction also led to increased conflicts. Mortals sometimes offended gods through pride or neglect, leading to divine punishments that could affect entire communities. Gods sometimes quarreled over their mortal favorites, turning human conflicts into cosmic disputes. The most famous of these divine conflicts centered around the city of Troy, where a dispute between goddesses over beauty and worthiness led to a war that lasted 10 years and involved both mortals and immortals as combatants. The Trojan War became the defining event of the heroic age. The war began when Paris, a prince of Troy, was asked to judge which of three goddesses, Hera, Athena, or Aphrodite, was the most beautiful. Each goddess offered him a bribe for his vote, and he chose Aphrodite's offer of the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife. Unfortunately, the most beautiful woman was Helen, who was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. When Paris took Helen to Troy, Menelaus called upon all the Greek kings to help him recover his wife. leading to the assembly of the greatest army in mortal history. The siege of Troy lasted 10 years, with heroes on both sides performing deeds that would be remembered forever. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, struggled with questions of honor and mortality. Hector, Troy's defender, embodied the ideal of duty to family and city. Odysseus, the clever king, devised strategies that combined wisdom with courage. The gods took sides in the conflict, with some supporting the Greeks and others defending the Trojans. This divine involvement elevated the war from a human conflict to a cosmic struggle, with the fate of both mortals and immortals hanging in the balance. The war finally ended when Odysseus devised the stratagem of the wooden horse, a hollow construction that allowed Greek warriors to infiltrate Troy's impregnable walls. The city fell, Paris and Hector were killed, and Helen was recovered, but at enormous cost to both sides. The aftermath of the Trojan War marked the beginning of the end of the heroic age. Many of the greatest heroes had died in the conflict, and those who survived faced difficult journeys home. The clear moral distinctions of earlier times had been blurred by the complexities of war. Odysseus himself faced a 10-year journey home, encountering challenges that tested his wisdom and endurance. His adventures became legendary, representing the struggles that all mortals face in trying to find their place in a world shaped by divine will and mortal choice. Other heroes faced similar challenges. Those who returned home safely often found their kingdoms changed, their families altered by long separation, and their own perspectives transformed by their experiences. The world they had left no longer existed, and they had to create new lives in changed circumstances. The generation that grew up after the Trojan War was different from their heroic parents. They had inherited a world filled with the consequences of great deeds and great conflicts. They were more cautious, more aware of the costs of heroism, and more focused on building stable communities than on individual glory. This marked the transition from the heroic age to what would later be called the Iron Age, the time when mortals would have to rely primarily on their own resources rather than divine intervention. It was an age of hard work, careful planning, and gradual progress, rather than spectacular achievements. Zeus observed this transition with satisfaction. The mortals had proven their resilience and adaptability, surviving the release of evils from Pandora's jar and the conflicts of the heroic age. They were becoming worthy inheritors of the earth, capable of creating their own civilization. The cosmic order had stabilized under Zeus's rule. The primordial threats had been contained. The Titans were securely imprisoned, and the Olympian gods had established their roles and territories. The world was ready for a long period of steady development, rather than dramatic upheaval. But Zeus also understood that vigilance would always be necessary. The forces of chaos remained powerful, even when contained. Future challenges would arise, requiring wisdom and strength to overcome. The cosmic order was stable, but not unchangeable. As the ages passed, the stories of the early times, the emergence from chaos, the wars of the Titans, the heroic deeds of mortals, became legends told around fires and in great halls. These stories served not just as entertainment, but as reminders of the principles that governed existence. The mortals learned from these tales that power without wisdom leads to downfall, that rebellion can be justified but carries great costs, that gifts often come with hidden prices, and that hope can sustain even in the darkest times. The myths became guides for living in a complex world. The gods themselves were changed by their interactions with mortals. They had learned that absolute power was less satisfying than meaningful relationships, that creation was more fulfilling than destruction, and that the cosmos was enriched by diversity and complexity rather than simple uniformity. Mount Olympus became not just a seat of power, but a community where different personalities and perspectives could coexist. The gods maintained their individual domains and characteristics while also cooperating in the governance of the cosmos. Zeus had evolved from a rebel seeking to overthrow tyranny into a wise ruler, balancing competing interests and maintaining cosmic harmony. His thunderbolt remained a symbol of ultimate authority, but he wielded it with restraint and wisdom rather than arbitrary power. The other Olympians had similarly grown into their roles. Hera had become a protector of marriage and family, despite her own complex relationship with Zeus. Poseidon ruled the seas with both power and responsibility. Hades governed the underworld with justice and compassion. Athena had emerged as the patron of wisdom and civilized warfare, teaching mortals to fight only when necessary and to prefer victory through intelligence over victory through brute force. Apollo brought harmony and beauty to the world through music and art. Artemis protected the wild places and the creatures that lived there. The younger gods, who had been born after the establishment of the Olympian order, brought new perspectives and energies. Hermes facilitated communication and trade between different peoples. Hephaestus advanced the arts of craftsmanship and technology. Aphrodite reminded everyone of the power and importance of love. Dionysus, the youngest of the major gods, brought the gifts of wine and celebration, teaching mortals that joy and release were necessary parts of life. His festivals provided outlets for emotions and energies that might otherwise turn destructive. As the world settled into its new patterns, a sense of deep peace began to emerge. This was not the static perfection of the Golden Age, but a dynamic harmony that could accommodate change and conflict while maintaining overall stability and progress. The seasons followed their appointed cycles, guided by the interactions between different gods. Spring brought renewal under Demeter's influence. Summer provided growth and abundance. Autumn offered the satisfaction of harvest, and winter allowed for rest and reflection. Mortals learned to work with these cycles rather than fighting against them. They developed agriculture that followed seasonal patterns, created festivals that celebrated the turning of the year, and organized their societies to take advantage of natural rhythms. The relationship between mortals and gods evolved into a partnership rather than simple dependence or opposition. Mortals honored the gods through rituals and offerings, while gods provided guidance and protection. Neither side dominated the other completely. Cities grew and prospered under divine patronage. Athens flourished under Athena's guidance, becoming a center of learning and democracy. Sparta developed its warrior culture with Ares' blessing. Other cities found their own paths, each reflecting the character of their patron deities. Trade and communication increased between different communities, facilitated by Hermes and protected by Zeus's authority. This exchange of goods and ideas accelerated cultural development and created bonds between formerly isolated peoples. The arts flourished as never before. Inspired by Apollo and the Muses, mortals created poetry, music, and visual art that rivaled divine creations in beauty and meaning. These works preserved the stories of gods and heroes while also exploring new themes and possibilities. Philosophy began to emerge as mortals used their divine gift of reason to explore questions about the nature of existence, the meaning of life, and the proper way to live. These investigations were encouraged by Athena and other gods who valued wisdom and understanding. Science and mathematics developed as mortals sought to understand the patterns they observed in nature. They discovered that the cosmos operated according to consistent principles that could be studied and predicted, even while acknowledging that divine will ultimately governed all things. The healing arts advanced as mortals learned to work with divine forces to cure diseases and repair injuries. Apollo's son Asclepius became the patron of medicine, teaching mortals to combine practical knowledge with spiritual understanding in treating illness. Law and governance evolved to balance divine authority with mortal needs and capabilities. Cities developed constitutions and legal codes that reflected both divine justice and practical necessity, creating systems that could maintain order while allowing for growth and change. As these developments unfolded over many generations, the sharp distinction between the age of gods and the age of mortals began to blur. The two realms remained separate but interactive, each influencing the other in countless ways. Heroes continued to emerge from time to time, mortals who achieved deeds that elevated them toward divine status. Some were eventually welcomed onto Mount Olympus, while others were honored with eternal remembrance and influence over mortal affairs. The gods themselves continued to evolve, learning from their experiences and adapting to changing circumstances. They remained immortal and powerful, but they also became more wise and compassionate through their long interaction with the complex world they had helped create. Zeus looked out over this world with deep satisfaction. The cosmos he ruled was neither perfect nor static, but it was alive with possibility and rich with meaning. The struggles and achievements of both gods and mortals contributed to an ongoing story that would continue for ages to come. The primordial chaos from which everything had emerged was now only a distant memory, contained and transformed by the creative forces that had shaped reality. Order and meaning had been established without destroying the potential for growth and change. The world had found its rhythm, the steady pulse of seasons and generations, the ongoing dance between stability and transformation, the eternal conversation between divine will and mortal choice. This rhythm would continue as long as existence itself endured. And in the quiet moments between great events, when the immediate dramas of gods and mortals gave way to peaceful contemplation, it was possible to sense the deep harmony that underlied all things, the music of the spheres that had been playing since the first stirring in the primordial void. The cosmos breathed slowly and steadily, its great cycles turning like vast wheels within wheels. Mountains rose and fell, seas advanced and retreated, stars wheeled through their courses, and life flourished in countless forms across the earth. In this vast and ancient harmony, individual lives found their meaning and purpose. Every mortal who lived and loved and struggled contributed something to the great story. Every god who wielded power with wisdom and compassion added to the cosmic order. The stories of the beginning, of chaos and Gaia, of titans and Olympians, of heroes and mortals, became part of the eternal memory that gave meaning to all existence. They were not just tales of the past, but living truths that continued to shape the present and future. Time moved in its great cycles, bringing new challenges and opportunities with each turn. The world rested in profound peace, secure in its patterns, confident in its purposes, ready for whatever transformations the future might bring. The gods kept their watch, mortals lived their lives, and the cosmos continued its ancient dance between order and possibility. In this deep stability, consciousness could relax, thoughts could slow, and the soul could rest in the knowledge that all was well with the world. The great work of creation was complete, and the long work of living and growing could continue in its own time and way. Your breath grows slow and steady, like the breathing of the cosmos itself. Your mind settles into the rhythm of the ages, and you drift gently into the peace that has watched over the world since the beginning of all things. Sleep comes naturally as the turning of seasons, as gentle as starlight, as deep as the roots of mountains.